accept my most gracious thanks for including me in today's special observance, honoring the 125th anniversary of the birth of one of India's most famous sons, an icon in the story of Mother India. In the Indian diaspora, or all of Trinidad and Tobago, household names of famous personalities of post-independent India include the Gandhis or the Nehrus. Some might know Mother Teresa, the nun, cricketers like Tendulkar or Gavaskar, actors like Amitabh Bachchan or Shah Rukh Khan. But we pause now to add the name of one honored in a 2012 poll by CNN and also History TV 18 as the greatest Indian. We pay respectful tribute to Bimrao Ramji Ambedkar. It is remarkable, whatever divergent views there may have been, to be so highly esteemed as the greatest Indian is an honor that is so rare. One of India's Nobel laureates, Amartya Sen, says of Ambedkar that he will be remembered forever. Ladies and gentlemen, let's walk with him. He stands tall as firstly a social revolutionary, secondly a colossus of economics, and finally a political pragmatist. After centuries of cruel European governance and its legacy of social stagnation and the ruthless exploitation of India's human and natural resources, India in the early 20th century agonized through the travail of decolonization, but saw the dawn of independence and self-determination. This was the cradle for young Ambedkar, and his career was pivotal in the transformation stages of modern India. On the 14th of April, 1891, he was born within the despised Maha caste at the base of India's social ladder. He grew to experience discrimination, marginalization, segregation, and scorn reserved for the untouchables of Indian society. As a schoolboy, he was given the back seat in his class. He could not touch the school's water jars. And one time with his brother and cousin, they were refused a ride on a bullock cart because as untouchables, they would have polluted the animals, the bullocks. Later at college, a Brahmin hotel keeper refused to give tea or water to this outcast student. Yet later in his life, when Ambedkar became a professor of economics at Sideman College, fellow professors of a higher caste refused to share a drinking water jug with the brilliant Ambedkar. But he remembered with gratitude his boyhood years when his Brahmin teacher gave him food at recess time and even changed his surname, hoping to remove that social stigma. But the Brahmin teacher knew this was only a token of kindness. Defying all odds, he was the first untouchable to be enrolled at Elphinstone High School in Mumbai, and later the first of the untouchables enrolled at the town's college. He went on to graduate in economics and political science at Bombay University. In the history of India's untouchables, he ranks among the first to rise to the pinnacle of academia, with degrees from home universities and also doctorates from New York's Columbia University and the London School of Economics. And whilst he was in London, he also added qualifications of a law degree. Leading India's social revolution, he edited pamphlets and periodicals, such as the weekly publications entitled Leader of the Silent and Mukh Naya. These provided a voice for the depressed classes in India. By 1927, he led marches and demonstrations agitated that the public water facilities everywhere be open to all citizens, and also that outcasts and untouchables be permitted to enter Hindu temples for worship. In his reaction against the social exclusivism of the caste system, he publicly condemned the laws of Manu for justifying caste discrimination. And on the 25th of December 1927, Ambedkar led thousands of untouchables to burn copies of the Manusmriti text. Later in 1930, he launched the Kalaram Temple movement and led about 50,000 followers hoping to visit the shrine for the first time. But when they arrived at the gates, it was closed by Brahmin officials to keep out these untouchables who walked with Ambedkar. Ambedkar despised the caste system and understood it as a product of Hinduism. And it is no wonder that he was later converted to Buddhism along with several of his followers, thus sparking a revival of interest in Buddhism in India. Ladies and gentlemen, our next stop is to hear the applause of those who have acknowledged and praised Ambedkar as the highest educated Indian economist of all times. Newly independent India needed an economic colossus of his stature to pilot the nation after the disaster and ruin of colonial control. For approximately 450 years, the economic masters of India were the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the British. Their trading companies and metropolitan administrators exploited and depleted India's wealth, her natural resources, they impoverished her people and retarded development. India's economic position was valued only for the benefit of Europe's economic comforts. It is no wonder that the driving force in economic matters was European-inspired. In the decades of independence, India's economic restructuring for sustainable development was in the hands of nationals, and Ambedkar took the lead. In his doctoral thesis in 1923, entitled Problems of the Rupee, Its Origin and Solution, he criticized British management of India's public treasury as the cause of his country's economic distress. He focused on land reform and the development of India's rich, fertile lowlands on the alluvial plains of the Indus-Ganges river systems and other areas for agriculture and farming. He encouraged the development of education and promoted public hygiene, community health, and medical facilities and housing as all essential for the states of India. As a minister of the newly formed government of independent India, Ambedkar established the Finance Commission of India. Yes, he opposed income tax for low-income groups and once more was critical of the caste system which divided labor. As a cabinet minister in charge of labor, irrigation and power during 1942 to 1946, he influenced India's water and electric policy designed to develop power resources. He provided invaluable guidance as the new government prepared the country to enter a modern era of industrialization, modernization, and socio-economic reconstruction, which subsequently dominated Indian affairs in the 20th century. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambedkar was also a distinguished political pragmatist, whose realism India needed to complement the nationalism so well enunciated through Gandhian struggles in the country's struggles from metropolitan autocracy to self-government. But how important were Ambedkar's political ideas? Early in his public life, this young professor in political economy testified before the British-mandated Southborough Committee to formulate constitutional changes for India. He understood domestic politics much better than the visiting foreign experts and insisted that the new Government of India Act of 1919 make provisions to include untouchables and religious minorities in the new electorates and reservations. Again, in 1932, in another step toward constitutional reform, the colonial office proposed separate electorates for the depressed classes. This sparked different positions and arguments between Ambedkar and Hindus of higher caste. Subsequently, an agreement was signed known as the Pune Pact, which reserved seats in the provincial legislatures for the depressed or lower classes. The agreement provided 148 seats in the legislature instead of the 71 as proposed by the British Prime Minister. Although Gandhi feared that this might divide the Hindu community, Ambedkar's stubborn radicalism successfully ensured that these depressed classes be recognized and not disenfranchised. The depressed classes identified in the Pune Pact refers to the untouchables, later called the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the India Act of 1935 and later the Indian Constitution of 1950. In 1937, Ambedkar's newly formed Independent Labour Party contested the Bombay election to the Central Legislative Assembly and won seats to the Assembly. But subsequent participation in the general elections to the Lok Sabha proved difficult for Ambedkar due to the popular, well-entrenched political support of the ruling Congress Party. Whatever were his party affiliations, India's ruling administration reserved a place for Ambedkar in the upper house of Parliament, the Rajya Sabha, serving there for the rest of his life. India needed Ambedkar. The Congress-led government of newly independent India invited him to serve as the first law minister. And on the 29th of August 1947, he was appointed chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee commissioned by the Assembly to write India's new constitution. After almost 3 years of deliberation, the constitution came into effect on the 26th of January 1950. It is easily one of the longest constitutional instruments in the world, with 22 parts, 395 articles, and 9 schedules. It provides for a democratic federal republic and a union of states with full sovereignty vested in the people. Granville Austin described the Constitution drafted by the Ambedkar Committee as, and I quote, "first and foremost, a social document which furthers the aim of social revolution or fosters this revolution by establishing conditions necessary for its achievement." End of quote. Time today will not permit us to do any real deep analysis of the 395 articles of this Indian Constitution. But suffice to say that Ambedkar inspired legislators to have enshrined provisions which guarantee dignity to all of India's citizens of whatever religion or caste you belong to. Ambedkar would later humbly admit, and I quote, "I came into the Constituent Assembly with no greater aspiration than to safeguard the interests of the scheduled castes, and was greatly surprised when the Assembly elected me to the drafting committee." End of quote. Ambedkar seriously viewed his role on this committee, and he really wanted to get rid of this untouchable syndrome. In fact, he made a pledge to himself early in life that he wanted to get rid of this human injustice, and if he failed, he said he will want to put an end to his life. In the Constitution, as a result of Ambedkar's policy of inclusion, he was able to skillfully weave human rights and freedoms into socio-economic rights and civil liberties for all classes of citizens. New provisions protected the rights of women. This was a progressive step for a country that had propagated dowry in marriages, the subjugation of women, and institutionalized child marriages. He persuaded the new government to adopt a policy for family planning. Ambedkar had condemned child marriages and ill treatment of women in Muslim society. He was also one of the many persons who was saddened by the partition of India and Pakistan. India's new constitutional guarantees banned all forms of discrimination, including untouchability. It opened the way to a new democracy. The Ambedkar drafted constitution was a people's charter, humanitarian in essence. The emphasis on untouchables comprises an important part in the Constitution, and it is entitled Special Provisions Relating to Certain Classes. Ambedkar was a democratic socialist, and he further contended that satisfaction and complacency only with political democracy was not sufficient. He observed that political democracy cannot offer permanent or durable, lasting change unless social democracy lies at its base. And he said, I quote, "What does social democracy mean? It means a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality, and fraternity as the principles of life." End of quote. Yes, these were universal elements for all free societies, well entrenched after the French Revolution and the American War of Independence. How has Ambedkar been seen by his people? He is regarded by many as the chief architect and the father of the Indian Constitution. And he said, and I quote, "I feel that the Constitution is workable, it is flexible, and it is strong enough to hold the country together both in peacetime and in wartime. Indeed, if I may say so, if things go wrong under the new Constitution, the reason will not be that we had a bad Constitution. What we will have to say is that man was vile." End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen and children, as I close, let me say with some authority, today is a birthday to celebrate. It is a birthday to celebrate a beautiful story of a humble human being. It is a story to remember a nation builder. We remember a nation builder, a lover of mankind who belongs to the world, not only of India. I will not doubt that at least among his people, he will continue to be honored as the greatest Indian and will forever be remembered. I thank you.